I am Karen Hartglass, and you are listening to It's All About Food. Just another episode in our 10-year plus sojourn to talk about and promote delicious, healthy plant foods for our own health, for the health of the planet, and to make it a better place for all beings who live on this planet Earth, our home. There's a lot of crazy things that are going on in the world, I know, and we're all doing what we can to make things better, to have our concerns heard by those who have some control. But we do have control of a lot of our own lives, and a lot of that control is what we put on our plates. And the good news is, the best thing for us is to eat a plant-based diet, and it can be the most delicious experience ever. And today I want to focus on the deliciousness of plant-based eating. And my guest to help me do this is Linda Soper-Kolton. And Linda came to the Catskill Animal Sanctuary in 2012 as a guest chef with the intention of teaching Compassionate Cuisine cooking classes. And lo and behold, she decided to stay. And she's been there ever since, and doing lots of wonderful things that we're going to be hearing about. She's graduated from the Natural Gourmet Institute and also has a certification as a holistic health coach from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and is the co-author of the cookbook that came out this year, Compassionate Cuisine. So we have a lot to talk about. Linda, welcome.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good. So let's talk about yummy things.
Let's talk.
So first, let's hear a lot about you. So I always love to hear about people's journeys and finding their path with vegan food and having the veil lifted from the culture that we live in, which is so exploitive. So what's your story?
So my story is that I was not raised vegetarian or vegan or with any awareness of where our food came from. And I'm a woman of a certain age, shall we say, so my generation, it just wasn't a thing. And it didn't, and I grew up as an animal lover. I rescued animals in the neighborhood. I buried them when they passed. I just was we had pets and just always an animal lover, but I never had made that connection to the animals I loved and the food that I ate until I went to college. And I was sitting outside my chem lab waiting to go in, and I was just sitting on a radiator, and there was a stack of brochures, and I happened to pick one up. And I happened to turn it over, and there was a picture of a cow on the ground, and I just was thinking to myself, well, this picture looks like, something's wrong with the cow, and there was two men standing near her. One of them had a pitchfork, one of them had a metal prod, and they were just standing there. And so I thought, well, they're obviously standing there trying to figure out how to get her up. But when that was the story that the picture told me, but the caption told me something very different, and that was a picture of a downed cow. And if you don't know, listeners, a downed cow or a downed animal is a cow that's too sick, too injured to get up, and this particular one was on its way to the slaughterhouse, and they were poking and prodding and beating her, trying to get her to get up so that she could basically walk to her death and become, a package of meat for somebody somewhere in some grocery store. And I just like you said, the veil, I that day I felt like my heart broke and that my whole life was a lie. I had no idea that that's where my food came from. That's where my hamburger came from. And somewhere in me, I must have known that meat comes from cows and animals, but the suffering and to see, this is one animal, and imagining that for the billions of animals that are eaten in a year, that this torture and this, it just put it into one life, one cow, one set of eyes looking at me, and that was the turning point in my life.
Well, that's often what does it, one-to-one, hearing an individual story. It can be an individual, non-human animal story, and we're so overwhelmed with the numbers. Mm-hmm. We hear 60 billion animals. What is that? 60 billion land animals killed every year for food. It's just something that we can't connect to, and yet I think we can connect to looking into someone's eyes. And you mentioned this downed cow. So a downed cow, unless they can get it up to walk to its own death to be slaughtered, then it has no value.
Right.
And it's
right.
And so that's why it gets kicked, and it's just horrific what happens to it, but it's just considered something to make money from.
Yes. Horrible. And it is that we can talk about numbers, and we can talk about these billions of animals and the species and what's happening and all of this. And what we have found at Catskill Animal Sanctuary is just time and time again over 17 years, 18 years, is that people have a hard time grasping that. It's just like you said, it's too overwhelming. You can't humanize that. But when they come to the sanctuary where we give tours, where people can get licked by a cow and can hug a chicken and let a turkey fall asleep in their lap, like, you don't get it, that one cow in that picture represented the billions of animals, but it's still a life. There's one life, and that one life matters. And so that connection on a one-to-one basis really often does change people's hearts and minds, and they get it. They get it.
And we need all the tools we can to help people get it.
Yes. And
okay, so yeah. Then you got it. And then what happened?
I got it for a while, for years, and I will say at some point life was taking all kinds of twists and turns, and I was back. I was back eating, the standard American diet, and I got to a point in my life where I felt a sense of like a disharmony that made me physically ill. And it was funny, but not funny. It was just that there was, I was out of alignment with things in my personal life and things about my belief system and my ability to live out my belief system, which was very purely living in harmony with all the creatures. And so it kind of all came to a head, and I was like, that's it. I cannot do this anymore, and started unpacking my life in a way that got things lined up, and then went back to a plant-based diet. And I ended up in midlife going to culinary school, which had always been a dream of mine. And I found a school that was the only one in my region that was vegetarian, vegan, and that was the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City. And I did that while working full-time, and graduated as a chef, a life's dream. So for anybody out there who thinks they're too old or it's too late to chase their dream, it's never, ever, ever too late.
It's never too late.
Never. And I went back to my full-time job at a large nonprofit, very high-stress job, and I secretly had always wanted to open up my own cafe, my own food establishment, and so it must have been 6 or 9 months later I did that. I quit my job, I opened it up, and it was out of the proverbial frying pan into the fire, because that was that's a tough job. But I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then that's when, during that time, I realized I really wanted them to eat well, not just eat plant-based, but to understand why, and I wanted them to learn how to cook for themselves and understand why it's so valuable to cook for yourself and care for yourself and nourish the people you love, and including yourself. And so I would shut down the cafe and do all that work, and then I would teach classes at night. And that's when I went to also get my health coach certification, because I really just wanted to connect with people and help them. And just, it's like such a great feeling, I think, when you're eating in a way that feels right for your soul. Like, it feels right for my soul not to eat animals and to eat healthy and to be the best person I can be. And a lot of that comes from what you eat and what you put in your mouth. So I was doing that and coaching clients, and I was real busy. And there was this job at Catskill Animal Sanctuary. And I said, gee, it's too bad I can't take that job because I have, all these other pokers in the fire. And I talked with the founder and director, Kathy Stevens, one night. We had a long chat and interview kind of, and I said, just the wrong time for me. A year later, they called me back and said, listen, our chef had to leave suddenly, and we need a guest chef to just get the season going. Are you interested? And I was like, at that time, was thinking about changing what I was doing. The cafe and the everyday serving food was kind of not filling my soul up in the way that I wanted to. I wanted to teach. I wanted to get that message out there. So I went up, and they had this fledgling cooking program, and we just fell in love with each other. And so so I'm still there, and never thought that would be the case. But
That's wonderful. What happened to the cafe?
I ended up selling it to a wonderful caterer who is doing great things with it. Unfortunately, it isn't plant-based, but she's a good soul, and I was able to kind of move out of that and move into something else, and it worked well. So, and then this program was just getting off the ground, and so it was just me for a while, and then teaching and starting a food blog for the organization, and just trying to get our recipes and our message out there. And fortunately, we were able to hire another chef, Chef Sarah Bone, who came to us 3 years ago, and she also graduated from Natural Gourmet Institute, and she's been a blessing in so many ways. She's just the brightest, the sweetest soul you'll ever meet, and she's just she has a gift. And so together we spread the message about how good vegan eating and plant-based eating is, and why it's wonderful. And we have all kinds of programs, and then we had this new cookbook, and so that's where we are.
Great. So the Compassionate Cuisine program consists of cooking classes?
We have public cooking classes, and so on the sanctuary we have a guest house, like a bed and breakfast, and it's called the Homestead, and it's this beautiful renovated farmhouse, and in it we have a teaching kitchen, and so several times a month we're teaching public classes where people can go to our website and register for a class. And we do all kinds of classes. Like it's not just for vegans, and it's not just about tofu or anything like that. It's we're chefs, so we have a wide variety of things to draw on and experiences and our own personal tastes and all. So we do everything from ethnic classes. Sarah just did dim sum this past weekend, and our wait list, we had 15 people on the wait list.
Wow.
We did Ethiopian a month ago. We do, so we do all these ethnic classes, but we also do things like, basic classes for beginners. We do workshops like knife skills so that you can be more comfortable in the kitchen and more efficient. We do hands-on workshops like how to make pasta from scratch and how to make your own pies and crusts, and Thanksgiving feasts we do. So we do all kinds, and we get people who are vegetarian, vegan, curious. We get vegans who bring their spouses or partners or family members in who kind of come in, maybe a little bit resistant, and usually by the end of the class, we've disarmed them in terms of, whatever people think about vegan food, that, it sticks and grass, and oh my God, what do you eat? And the food is delicious, and nobody can argue with delicious food. Right?
That's right. Just put it in their mouths. Now,
Right.
Do you make food for the sanctuary, for events, or for the homestead, or anything like that?
We do events. Sure, we have. We've done many over the years, and often what we do is, like, we've done cocktail parties, for example. We invited animal sponsors on the property to spend, kind of quality time with their sponsored animals, and we offered a beautiful cocktail party with finger foods that were, of course, all vegan. And even our animal sponsors, they're not all vegan, but they enjoyed tasting like a deviled potato, which is inspired by a deviled egg, and things like that, where they're like, oh my God, like I can still get those familiar flavors and textures that I remember. And so a lot of what we do in the events that we cater is to try and make delicious food that might be inspired by a food that's not plant-based, so that people realize like it's not rice and beans every day, or it's not a salad, or whatever those myths are that people think vegan food is, and they realize, like, I can have lasagna. We just did, we were on WAMC, Food Friday, this past week, and we had a wonderful time there with the host, and we brought in, like, tons of samples for him, and he's not vegan, and he would take bites during the break so he could talk about them, and I don't think he was being disingenuous when he was like floored with every bite of every dish that he tasted. He's like, "This is vegan? Like, are you kidding me?" And so you just, so we do events where we try to get people to appreciate and sample and taste wonderful food. We do the classes. We do another program that's terrific. It's free. And when people come on the weekends to take a tour and talk to staff and meet the animals, Sarah is there, and you can sit in on a free demo, a food demonstration, and she'll demonstrate how to make some simple recipes. You'll get samples. You can get to ask her questions about anything that's on your mind, and it's a great kind of bookend to meeting the animal, getting licked by a cow or something, and then learning how to make something that doesn't involve using animals. So it's a really nice program. So we're very busy.
Great. Well, it still floors me that people have the preconceived notions about a vegan diet, even today in 2019. But many people do. And it really is satisfying when you can make something and put it in their mouths and see their eyes light up. I can do this. I can eat this. This is good. Would you come and cook for me?
Right. We do get asked that a lot.
Yeah, of course. Because most people don't know where their kitchen is.
I know, it's a lost art. And we say, for as much as people say, oh, this is easy for you though, because you guys are chefs. It's like, when I come home, like I work, every day. I got to get dinner on the table for my family. Like, it's not a chef creation every night. It's, what do I have in my refrigerator? Or what am I pulling out of the garden? And what can I make that's quick, but it's healthy? And, I don't think about what we're missing. We're not. People think a vegan diet or a plant-based diet is all about what you're giving up. If you really think about it, you're giving up, meat, chicken, fish, dairy, eggs, 5 things. And the world of food is open to you. And there are so many, there's an abundance. So I feel abundance rather than deprivation. And it has made me more curious. It has made me more open. It's made me, try new things that I probably wouldn't have tried if I just had my regular, here's my piece of meat, here's my starch, and here's my vegetables. So it's a really creative journey to take, and one that I encourage folks to just try. Just, give yourself a little time and realize how joyful it is and how much better you're going to feel. If you think about the chronic health condition crisis that we have in our country and in the world, it's awful. I mean, you must know people who have, cancer or diabetes or high blood pressure or all these things that are largely related to the lifestyle choices that we make. And so to feel better and to have a better quality of life simply by what you put in your mouth, like, that's the prescription. It's what you put in your mouth, not what comes out of a bottle. So
it's a story I've been preaching for so many decades, and it's always joyful when somebody gets it, and always frustrating, especially with people that are close to you that don't get it. When you see them popping their blood pressure medications and their statins, and you see how they're struggling, and it's just I have no words for it. They could feel better. It's so frustrating too. People who are diabetic and they're going to lose their limbs, and they just say, "I can't change. I need my meat." And where does that come from?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. In fact, my husband, I tell this story sometimes when I'm out with, meeting different people. He was not vegan. We got married. I knew he wasn't vegan or even interested, but he would eat what I made for him, and I did make meat for him, and I always made what I made on the side, and he liked it because it was good. And he ended up needing to see a cardiologist because he had something with his heart that they were concerned about. And the cardiologist told us, we went in there, and he said, your numbers are not good. You're way too much, your blood pressure is way too high, and your cholesterol is way too high, but don't change a thing. Don't worry. You don't have to change anything. I'm going to give you a couple prescriptions. And I looked at him, and I was like, how about lifestyle? Like, can we try diet and exercise? And he said, that's not going to do enough. That's not going to, don't bother. And I was like, don't bother? Like, really? You're telling me not even to bother? That's the message you're giving him? So he ended up going on the medication for 6 months. We went back. His numbers were better, of course, because you're on medication. And the doctor told us, great, everything looks great. Come back in 6 months again. We'll do a checkup. And in those 6 months, my husband decided, I don't want to do this. I know there are side effects from these medications. I don't want my life to come out of a bottle. Like, that's how I'm staying alive, because if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to die. So we went back to the doctor, and he says, oh, look, your numbers look great, and you look great. He said, so what are you doing different? And he said, oh, you know what? I'm transitioning to a plant-based diet. I felt so good that I started exercising. I've never exercised in my whole life as an adult. I'm running every other day now. I quit smoking, lost 30 pounds. And the doctor was like, hey, that's fantastic. He goes, oh, yeah, and I gave up. Haven't taken my medication in 6 months. And the doctor said, he looked at us and he said, suit yourself.
Whoa.
And I was like, really? And he told us in our initial visit, if the medical community could find a way to put Lipitor in the water, they would, so that everybody could eat McDonald's every day.
Oh my goodness!
So this is the professionals that are out there, and I know there are good cardiologists and wonderful cardiologists who are pushing the envelope today and talking about diet and lifestyle. But there's a lot of them out there who aren't, and this is the advice they get. And for people who don't know enough or don't have an influence in their life to help them by saying there is another way to do this, there are other options. This is what you get, and this is why every third commercial is a medication or something like that on TV. Like, this has become the new norm, and it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have
Putting
to be that
Lipitor
way.
in the water so everyone could eat McDonald's. There's a sickness
forget
there.
That as long as I live. And now, 10 years later,
and that's from a doctor who took the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm.
Right.
Yes.
Like that?
I mean, we now know that statins don't really work, and they don't really prevent heart disease, and they don't prevent heart attacks, and they don't extend life.
Correct. And yet and these are people, that we've been taught to trust. You go to a doctor, you listen to your doctor.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the day I saw that cow in that brochure, I went, oh my God, this is what's going on? And so when you go to the doctor and you hear this and something isn't right and you go, oh my God, wait a minute, this can't be right. So it's almost like the veil is being lifted there for people, because they're starting to ask those questions like, is this the quality of my life? It's going to come out of a bottle of pills for the rest of my life, and I'm not actually going to feel good? It's just going to maybe prevent me from dying, perhaps, but I still don't feel good. So it's just, I don't know, there's a lot of myths, a lot of things we've grown up with, a lot of things we trust that we just kind of need to shatter and see things differently.
Yes, and we can do it and make it delicious. So now let's talk about the cookbook. Okay, so how many recipes in here have you made a lot, either at your restaurant or for the sanctuary?
So these recipes, the inspiration for this book was actually because we had so many folks at the sanctuary who told us over the years, "Oh my God, you guys have to write a book. You have to write a book. You have a culinary program. You need a cookbook." And so it was really a long time coming, a labor of love. We're really proud of it, and the recipes in the book either came from or were inspired by our events. Our summer camp for kids, where we do workshops for them and made lunch for them, vegan lunch, or from the classes and the many things that we do. So that was where these recipes came from, and so many of them we've made lots of times. Like, for example, our breakfast recipes are served at the homestead. So if you come over and you sleep over, you're going to wake up and you might have pecan chocolate chip coffee cake. You'll probably have our homestead granola. You'll definitely have Best Banana Bread, which is so popular there. They make pancakes. They make a wonderful tofu scramble. We have a tempeh hash. So all of these recipes are in rotation in many of the things we do, and everybody has their favorites, of course.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I would say that this is comfort food. What do you think?
A lot of it is. So if I was going to write a cookbook, and it was if it was for an audience that was trying to transition to a plant-based diet purely for their health, they got a recommendation from a good cardiologist who said, "Hey, you should change your diet," and I would have a different slant to it. These recipes are full of many of them wonderful, healthy, delicious ingredients, whole foods. Our philosophy is whole foods are always best, least minimally processed foods, using them as transition foods. Those seem to work well. So if you've got a spouse, a friend, somebody in your life, and they want to consider it, but they're not quite sure how they're going to make it work, there are transition foods like Beyond Burgers and, sausages and things like that make them realize, like, oh, okay, this tastes pretty good. I can do this. And then, welcome to our world, and then we're going to blow your socks off with, fabulous things that don't come out of a box or out of a package. But a lot of these are foods that are comforting. In fact, we have a class called Comfort Foods. So a lot of these came from, like, our Thanksgiving classes, where you are looking for, rich, satisfying, delicious foods, but all healthier than what you would get with animal-based recipes. So,
absolutely. I was looking at in the appetizers what do you call it? It's like a cauliflower, the buffalo wing cauliflower. What do you call it?
Buffalo cauliflower bites.
Oh, there you go. Buffalo cauliflower bites. So cauliflower or buffalo wings made with cauliflower or other vegetables, I find, are becoming more popular, which is exciting, rather than using the wing of an animal in a spicy sauce, because that's really all it's about, right? It's just some kind of medium for the sauce.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And cauliflower is such a trendy vegetable these days, which is exciting because it's so good for us.
Yeah, I think was it 2017 or 2018? It was like the vegetable of the year.
Oh, I didn't know it won that award. Congratulations, cauliflower.
Cauliflower. But you're right. Like a lot of what people think they're going to miss is like the taste, like the flavors, the spices, and a lot of what we do is just like you use the same spices or the same sauces. You just use it on something different. It's not the wing of a little bird. It's it's a vegetable, and then everybody's happy. These we serve. Oh gosh, we serve them an awful lot, and people are satisfied. They feel good about it. They're delicious, and I don't know. It might be crazy to think that gnawing the flesh off a bone, like, is not, like, somewhere in you that doesn't feel right. As a human being, I think we're all kind. We're all compassionate somewhere in there, and to do that, like if that's how you're eating your food, or like, ribs or whatever, somewhere in you, I have to believe that that's just ringing a bell in you going, this is crazy.
This is crazy. I don't know. Humans, I think, can go one way or the other. But we have good in us and we have not so good in us. And if we take an effort to nurture the good, we can become really, really good.
Right. I agree.
And it feels better.
And it feels
That's one of the things I always say. It feels good to be good.
It does, doesn't it?
I don't think it feels that good to be bad. But I don't know. I'm not someone who's into being bad. But doing bad things, I can't see how it feels good.
No. And being plant-based and being vegan, that feels good.
It feels good. It absolutely does. You don't know how good you can feel until you do it.
Right.
I'm looking at your nutty breakfast bars, and I got this thing. There's some foods that bug me, especially foods that people go out and buy, and it bugs me that people buy bars, energy bars or quick food bars. I don't mind when people make them themselves, and people should know how easy they are and that they can just use quality ingredients and they're going to taste much better and be better for them. And your nutty breakfast bars are a good example.
They are, in fact, and I understand that, people are pressed for time. It's one of those resources that we never seem to have enough of. It feels like, and I think it feels that way because we're not making choices. We're not being thoughtful about the choices we make and how we spend our time. And I was saying to my husband the other day, I was like, I've got so many things on my plate right now, and I just have to step back and go, wow, you've got to make better choices about, and they're tough choices, right? So making the tough choice to say, I need to make time to cook, to make food, to have fresh food, to make my breakfast bars, occasionally. Those are choices that once you start going in that direction, they feel good, your family feels good about it, you feel good about it. So, yeah, these are fantastic. We served them most recently at a board meeting. I remember I brought them for breakfast. And people were like, are you kidding me? Like, how about, why don't you wrap them up and sell them and package them? And I'm like, that's not what we do, but thank you.
I know, that's what people want. They want easy and they want convenient.
They sure do.
But there's a price. There's a price with easy and convenient. I can understand. Occasionally it's okay, especially with so many people having crazy lives like you were talking about. But there's a price for convenience, and it can really take a toll. And making food from whole natural ingredients at home is ideal, and it will serve you better in the long run. And a lot of that has to do with the cost, because restaurants, you ran one, they're hard work, and it's hard to make them profitable. And sometimes restaurants will cut corners to cut costs and use things that aren't quality, or use things that extend the shelf life or make it more inexpensive for them. Salt, oil, and sugar. Right. Rather than using full flavored foods. And it's a leap of faith when we eat in a restaurant.
It's a good way to put it.
I mean, I know there's regulations, and here in New York City we have strict health department regulations, and the restaurants are graded. But even with that, that there are loopholes, and anything can happen. It really is a leap of faith, which is why it's good to know how to make food at home and make it so delicious.
It is. In fact, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and you were talking about the real cost of food, and you were talking about the subsidies and why meat might seem like it's less expensive than eating vegan, and there is that myth that eating vegan is so expensive. But the other part of the cost that we don't see is the cost of healthcare that we're not going to see tomorrow. It's not going to show up in your grocery bill, but if you keep eating meat and saturated fats and an unhealthy diet, processed foods, you're going to pay for it. You're going to be paying for it in medication every month. You're going to be paying for it in doctors. You're going to be paying for it in potentially surgery and things like that. So, you look at the food that you buy and the time that you use as an investment in your health that actually keeps your costs for living a whole lot lower than if you eat, if you don't eat this way.
And the food's better. Even if you don't know how to cook, you could learn how to make a few simple dishes that taste delicious. in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
I know
You
it's
said
not
something.
possible for some people to make their own food, but I can't help but encourage people just take the Compassionate Cuisine book, open it to a recipe, and make it.
And make it. Yeah, and
And make it.
there's so many great resources out there today. This one is great. You can get it at our website, casanctuary.org. The book is Compassionate Cuisine, 125 plant-based recipes from our vegan kitchen. However, there's so many resources out there. There's so many wonderful people who are real people who are just putting, food blogging and putting recipes up. And there's just a wealth of information to make things easy. If you're looking for 15-minute meals, there's books about that. If you're looking for budget-friendly meals specifically, there's books and blogs about that. So there's really no reason to not give it a try. And, you might not feel comfortable in the kitchen, your first or second or third time, but chances are you're not going to kill anybody. And chances are you're going to find that nourishing yourself and knowing how to cook for yourself, even the simplest meals, nourishes you in a way that doesn't feel like anything that you can buy or purchase or get through the drive-through. It's a different feeling.
When I look at a cookbook, when I read a cookbook, I'm always looking for the surprises. And I'm going to divulge the secret of this cookbook, and that is for your cannoli. I was very surprised to see one of the ingredients you use in your cannoli filling. I want to know how that came about.
It's funny because we just made these. I made them on Friday for our the radio interview we did, and the host was like, "You have to be kidding me!" When I told him what was in there, just couldn't believe it. So I had just come from a wonderful place in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania called Vegan Treats.
Oh yeah.
And oh my God, to walk into a place where I could order anything was just one of, and where I live, there's very few vegan places. So it was just a wonderful, fun experience, and it got me thinking. They had cannoli, and it got me thinking. We had a conversation about tofu and how, tofu is used in lots of desserts, and it is used in many of their desserts. And I said, I wonder what you could do without tofu. And I started thinking, there has to be another way to fill these cannoli. And I was preparing for an Italian class at the sanctuary. And I said I wanted to make cannoli because that's one thing that, if you can make cannoli vegan and it tastes good, I was sure I could win somebody over. And I just tried different fillings. I know I did try tofu. I tried cashews. I tried a whole bunch of things. And I was just sitting there, and I had a friend who was literally driving up and down the street. She would go home, and then she would come back when I had a new filling. And she was like, "No, it's okay. This one's okay, or that one's okay." And she had left, and I was like, "What is white and fluffy? What can I?" And it was like, bing, mashed potatoes. So I said, there's got to be a way to use mashed potatoes in here. So that's what's in here. It's the shell is, flour and all the other stuff that normally goes into a cannoli shell. There's no eggs in here, which is easy to do without eggs, so that wasn't a problem. But it's got some vegan butter and powdered sugar and a little bit of coconut cream. But it's mostly potatoes, baking potatoes.
Wow.
And they're really good. In fact, that class, I'll never forget, I had two people, this wonderful couple, and they sat there, and they were from the Bronx, and they're Italian, and they were kind of like, this can't be a cannoli, forget it. They were impressed.
I have to try this, definitely. I'm a cannoli snob, and I've been...
Oh, are you?
Yeah, and I've tried a lot of vegan cannolis, and I don't really like them because the filling just tastes like frosting.
I don't think it tastes like frosting.
Yeah. I remember growing up, I live in New York. I've lived all over the place, but now I'm back in New York. But I grew up near an Italian neighborhood, and there were a couple of amazing bakeries that made cannoli. And I think it was one of my favorite things on the planet. But I gave it up because it wasn't worth it.
And, that's
the cruelty wasn't worth it.
No, and when you look at it that way, it really never is. But I say to people, like, we're not trying to say that, what we're making is going to be the exact replica of what you had. I always tell people, like, I miss the shell, a crunchy shell with this, delicious, beautiful filling in the middle. And so I make a cannoli. I make it out of baked potatoes. Can you tell me that it's exactly the same? I don't remember what a real cannoli tastes like, but I don't know. It tastes pretty darn close. And the same thing, we've got some cheese recipes in here. And, I don't know if they taste the same. I would probably say they don't taste the same, but they're beautiful and unique and wonderful in their own right, and they're healthy and they're cruelty-free. So that tastes pretty good in my book.
Speaking of potatoes, in your bio, it mentioned that originally you were making mashed potatoes with milk powder and potato flakes.
That was my mother.
And my question is, did you like that?
No, I have to say, I think that's why I ended up in doing something in food, because my mother was, she just was not a cook, didn't want to be a cook, didn't want to be in the kitchen. She was, took us to the museums and she was just all about culture and everything else. So she was not domestic, she was not a domestic diva by any stretch, and she's the first to admit it, but she would put dinner on the table some nights, and, it was like, here's a box of mashed potatoes, and here's some milk. Let's make mashed potatoes with powdered milk. And we ate it, and I was like, oh my, then I was like, my God, this is awful.
Yeah, my memories of instant potatoes is like one of the worst inventions. And if people would only realize how easy it is to boil a potato.
Oh my God.
Just mash it with your fork. You don't have to do much to it. You just need a good potato.
You do, and then even the vegan butter that you can put on it today, it's different than it was. I mean, today is a great day to be vegan because the foods that are out there are so wonderful, and they're just so much better than they were. One of my favorite butters, probably my favorite butter, is Miyoko's cultured butter. It's like, for me, I remember sweet butter, and that is it. And it's light and delicate and has that little bit of tanginess to it. It's wonderful, but, there are Wayfair has a butter, and there's a butter named Melt, and there's, of course, there's Earth Balance, but there's so many options. So you put a potato in the oven or boil it, take a fork and mash some butter in it, and my God, you'll never need powdered potatoes again, that's for sure.
Of course, if we're in Wisconsin, we can't call Miyoko's vegan cultured butter. We have to call it vegetable spread.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah, it's crazy. There are some laws out there that are being passed that are insane, and that's one of them.
Wow, that's what they did with the mayonnaise, right? Hellman sued Just Mayo because they didn't want it to be called mayonnaise. And
sure, they sued, but in the end they realized they weren't getting the response they wanted, and in the end they ended up making their own vegan mayo. Right. They dropped the suit and made their own vegan mayo.
That was fantastic. That was
exactly. But there are still some companies that are not making the right decision. They want to stay in the dark, and they just want laws to support their failing industries.
Once there's light, you can't keep it dark. You just can't. And so it might take a while, and they can try and hold on to the darkness, and people can try and hold on to the darkness, and living in darkness, eating in darkness, which is eating foods that involve suffering and on a massive, massive scale. Eventually, the light will get to them, and it will get to more and more people in this world. It's just, now that it's here, it just can't be extinguished.
I love that. And that's a great place to wrap this up. It's the light. Love is the only answer, folks. And let the light shine in on your food plate and make it plant-based and delicious. And try the Compassionate Cuisine recipes. They look so yummy. Thank you, Linda Soper-Kolton, for joining me today and for your wonderful work. Can you do me a favor?
Sure.
Please give Kathy Stevens a big hug from me and my partner, Gary. We love her. And we miss her.
I didn't know that. I will give her a big hug, and I'll give her a kiss on the cheek as she gives to everybody who comes her way.
Okay, great. Thank you again for joining me.
Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. That was Linda Soper-Kolton, co-author of the cookbook Compassionate Cuisine, and it indeed looks really yummy. We have about, 10 minutes 11 minutes, tick-tock, tick-tock. So a couple of Saturdays ago, when Gary and I were still in California, we catered a dinner. We were talking about this 2 shows ago when we were thinking about what we were going to make. And I just wanted to tell you, it was spectacular. Everything worked out, but there's a reason why it was so good. And it was good because we were prepared. So you might want to visit my What Vegans Eat blog, and you can see what we made. I'll tell you the number. It's 1635. And it was incredible. I made my favorite desserts, a fresh fruit tart. It had strawberries and berries and custard and a light chocolate layer in between the crust and the custard to kind of seal everything in. Really amazing. And a fresh tarte aux pommes, which is an apple pie with no crust on top, French style. I love making it because there's a nice way to lay the apple slices in there that just looks really beautiful. But some of the amazing things were the savory items. And Gary made his amazing garlic mashed potatoes with cashew cream and a chicken fried tofu. This was not only delicious, it was just mind-blowing. At some point, either in a book or on the website, we'll post a recipe, but it has a skin on it, which is rice paper. And then it was breaded and sautéed. It was just incredible. And we served a number of appetizers that included 2 cheese boards, and one of them had 2 of Miyoko's cheese wheels, and another had the tree-lined cheese. And we wanted to introduce the people that were at the dinner to some of the things they could buy commercially that are vegan and yummy. And we had a platter of gorgeous roasted vegetables. There was just so many wonderful items. But what I want to talk about is if you're planning a dinner, the key word is planning. And I'll tell you why. Because if you don't think ahead and if you don't prepare enough in advance, you will be very surprised when the people start coming in and maybe you haven't made everything or thought everything through, and then all kinds of challenges come along. And this was indeed the case when we got to the home where we were putting the dinner together, because this one family generously donated to use their home for the dinner for 12 people. And number one, we prepped and cooked mostly everything in advance so that we would just bring it to the place. And it turned out to be a good idea because there really wasn't any space to cook and prep. And I'm really glad that we thought in advance to do that. And I don't know, when you go to someone's home for dinner, how they do it or how you might do it. I just know sometimes I've been invited to a party where someone has decided he was going to prepare a meal, and we'll get there and there's no food ready. We come at the invited time and there's nothing because the person hasn't gotten started yet. And it may be 2 hours, 3 hours before there's something ready for people to eat. And that can be fun sometimes if everybody's participating. And it really depends on what it is, what the intention is. But I think if you're inviting people for a prepared meal and people come hungry, there should be food for them when they arrive. And so I'm really glad that we prepped. And it was a challenge because we weren't in our own home. We didn't have our own supplies. We didn't have our own pots and pans. It was amazing how we were able to do it all with so little. We did have to purchase these aluminum, they're like chafing dishes, only they're made of aluminum. And catering companies, of course, buy their own made out of stainless steel, for example, and they're reusable. Unfortunately, we had to buy throwaway kind because we didn't have any other choice. But it really came in handy to be able to store the food that we had prepared and then be able to warm it up in the containers that we got. So that worked out really, really well. And what was wonderful, the best part of the meal, was there were very few leftovers, and when we cleaned up, the plates were clean, amazingly clean. The main dish, as I mentioned, was a chicken fried tofu with mashed potatoes and sautéed greens. We used broccoli rabe and kale and spinach, and it had little bits of a seitan bacon in it. And it was sitting on a luscious piccata sauce. And when the plates came back, there was nothing. There wasn't any sauce or anything. Everything. They lapped it all up. I was also surprised because I'm not a big bread eater. And I love making bread, but I don't make bread much anymore because I don't like eating wheat. And I've also dabbled in making yeasted gluten-free breads. We have recipes for them at responsibleeatingandliving.com. But I don't like to eat a lot of it because I think it's a comfort food. I think it's a special occasion food. It's not something I want to eat every day. But I made a lot of homemade bread, and it was really fun to make. And I did sample some of it, and it was really yummy. And I found it helped everybody clean their plates, because with all the rich sauces and whatever, there's nothing like taking some fresh bread and wiping it all up with that and eating it. In fact, it reminds me of when I was living in France, and all the food that was served always came with a sauce. And even when I was ordering vegan, there was some kind of something to sop up. And we would take a piece of the baguette and wipe the plate with it. And I remember this horrified one of my friends who was brought up a little differently than some others, and she told me that the proper way to do it was to take your fork and put it in a piece of bread and then move the fork around to get the sauce. That it wasn't appropriate to do it with my hands. Anyway, I continue to do it with my hands, but just know that when you're in France, some people may want you to use your fork instead of your hands, or maybe here in the States. It really depends on where you are. I just like to get into my food. But it was an amazing meal, and I hope you visit What Vegans Eat Day 1635 to see what we offered. And while we're here, I just wanted to mention, I just got an announcement regarding the film For the Birds. Do you remember? We had the filmmaker on this show, Richard Myrons, the director, and we talked about his film For the Birds, and it was premiering a while back in New York and Los Angeles. Well, now it is available to watch around the world. You can see it via Apple TV, Google Play, and Amazon Video, and I just recommend if you Google the film For the Birds streaming, you can find it. And I recommend seeing it. It was a film that asked a lot of questions, and it didn't necessarily give the answers, and that's what a lot of good art does. It makes you question. It makes you see things, and then it's up to you to digest and decide where your life is going to take you now that you have become aware of certain situations. For the Birds. And of course you remember I spoke with Kathy Stevens recently of her organization, United Poultry Concerns, and she has a new book out called For the Birds. This is a good time for the birds, at least people that are exposing what's going on that we need to know. Yeah, so we have a couple of minutes left, and something that's been just a little disturbing to me, perhaps you've seen it in the news. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but I just want to alert you that there's been a lot of things going on with our government, and one of the more disturbing things to me. There's been plenty of disturbing stuff, believe me. But all of the environmental regulations that are being shut down, that are being rolled back is the word, is kind of scary. So there are about 83 of them, the New York Times recently reported, environmental rules that are being considered to roll back. And they have effectively already approved about almost 50 rollbacks are completed. And it's reported that 34 more are in process, and for a total of 83. And these are rollbacks that negatively affect air pollution and emissions. They're encouraging more drilling and extraction, and they definitely affect animals. Some of them are, the most recent one is devastating to endangered species. And one of the reasons is that of the over 1,300 animals that have been listed on the Endangered Species Act, only about 47 have actually been taken off the list. And so those who are against having these types of regulations will say they're not doing anything because we haven't taken enough animals off the list. And I'm looking at it in a different way. I'm looking at it as, no, we need to do more. We're not doing enough. We don't want to do less. We need to do more. So anything you can do, contact your elected officials, let them know how you feel about these rollbacks, and let them know that you want clean water, you want clean air, and we want to protect as much wildlife and our own lives that we can. And meanwhile, you can make healthy, delicious food and do it with the new cookbook, Compassionate Cuisine. Thanks for listening. I'm Karen Hartglass. This is another episode of It's All About Food. You can find me at info@realmeals.org. Visit my website, responsibleetingandliving.com. Have a delicious week.